Good afternoon. This is Margaret Graziano with Keen Alignment, and I have with me today Tiffany Tremmel, the Chief Talent Strategist of Cloud Valve. Tiffany, would you like to say hello and briefly introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. As Margaret said, my name is Tiffany Tremmel. I am the Chief Talent Strategist at Cloud Valve Company. We're a waterworks manufacturer located in the heart of Iowa. I am joining Margaret so that we can help each and every person maximize their HR effectiveness and learn some new leadership techniques. So I'm excited about joining you today.
Great. So our promise to you for joining was that we would give you the recipe of how to be an internal people optimization specialist in your company, help your business grow, achieve their goals through people. In a nutshell, that's what we're here to do. And fundamentally, it's about being the change rather than looking outside of yourself and looking at the CEO or the COO or the VP or the president or the business owner or whoever it is that you report to, looking within first, making the changes within, and then bringing that to the organization. So we'll get started right away here. And first of all, in order to make any kind of difference, the first thing we need to know is what are people already, what's the already always perception of human resources? When people think of human resources in general, what do they think of? And whether we like it or not, the industry has a pretty bad rap. And mostly that bad rap got created long before we started playing in the field. Harvard Business Review did a pretty large expose on human resources, and the title of one of the first articles was Why People Love to Hate HR. And first and foremost, when HR calls a manager and says, I need to talk to you, immediately the walls go up, the fear goes up, and no matter who in the organization it is, even if it's an executive, there is a concern. What did I do wrong? What are they going to tell me I did wrong? And what's wrong that needs to be fixed? So it's a wrong, not a right. It's first instinct. So HR being the police is a big already always perspective that people have. And I want to say perception as well, because many of us say in passing, well, it's just their perception, but perception is reality for people. Also, because they don't work in human resources, people who don't work in human resources think it's HR's job to replace employees and that HR has this philosophy that people are replaceable. If Mary doesn't work out, we'll just get a new Mary. That couldn't be farther from the truth. HR understands how hard it is to find new people, to onboard new people, to integrate new people, to train new people. And the last thing they want to do is have a churning door for employees. And then when many folks think about HR, and including people who work in HR, they have this thought that it's a whole lot of paperwork, a whole lot of administration. And the reality is most people in human resources today are in human resources because they want to elevate people's contribution at work and help the company achieve their goals. So I don't believe this is true. And it is the perception that's out there. Now, what's also out there is that companies, organizations, when they tell the truth, when they report to organizations like Harvard and PricewaterhouseCoopers and McKinsey, they say what we need is a human resources department that is innovatively addressing the people issues. Rather than looking through the old frame of mind is we hire for this job, the person will do this job until they move on, that they want us to widen our perspective and look at people issues from an innovative standpoint. They want and need us to be responsive to their needs. And when I say needs, I'm talking about business needs, more so than, hey, I don't see my name on my insurance, or I don't see my beneficiary on there. It doesn't mean that that's not important, but they want us to be responsive to the business needs. So if your business has peaks and valleys, if your business has cycles, they want to know that you all have thought about that and have planned ahead so you can be advisors to what we do during these ebbs and flows with our people. They want you to understand what the challenges are and to make recommendations to fix them. I had a customer and he kept saying, I just want an on-ramp to be as progressive as our off-ramp. They didn't have a really good hiring process when we met them. They were a technology company in the in the space of automotive vehicles, although they were dealing with big vehicles like trains. And they said, we know when we want to fire people, we know when they're not doing well, but we do not have an aggressive, progressive on-ramp so that we can off-ramp people when they're not a fit. And their HR person had a really hard time figuring that out. She wanted to know exactly what the recs were, when they needed them. And the CEO kept saying, hey, I can't tell you when someone's going to fail, but I want to know we have a pipeline of talent ready to go so that we do not have to hold on to poor performers. He was a former General Motors person. So he subscribed to the bottom 10% if they're not performing, or if they're poor performers, put them on a PIP, but if they don't produce, we got to let them go. So another aspect of new school human resources, or better said, talent management, is that training and development will be a core competency of the people in human resources, that they will understand adult learning and what adults need to learn and retain, that they reimagine their role rather than people to keep the company compliant, that they're people to help the company get into momentum and to achieve their business results. And reimagining their role is also persuading and influencing everybody else in the organization that rather than it be new school HR, it's talent management, talent optimization, people optimization. And that the entire department of human resources or people operations or people strategy elevates to serve the business needs. So said in a nutshell, it's like an MBA, a master's in business, thinking in the human resources department. And Tiffany will share with us what she's done in her career and how she's made the shift from old school HR to new school talent management. So everybody I have talked to, everybody I've coached in human resources, they have a deep desire to make an impact, to be a part of the positive change, to elevate performance and elevate engagement. Unfortunately, most people don't know how to do that. They think it's the program of the month or the employee reward or perks and incentives and parties, but that's not really it. When we really look at what people need and what people want, people need to belong, people need to feel valuable, people need to feel fully utilized, and then they can be engaged. All of that superfluous Starbucks gift card and the bowling outing and let's walk 5 miles for charity, if you don't love what you're doing and if you don't feel connected to what you're doing and if you don't feel part of the larger organization, none of that is going to fix engagement. Now, there's way more to it, but in a nutshell, it is really, really, really about optimizing people and having people feel connected to the organization's purpose. So the top 5 outcomes of elevating your HR effectiveness and becoming a real strategic business partner, not just the title, but thinking strategically, operating strategically, and partnering with that business owner to take that organization to the next level. The outcomes of that is it creates transparency. People don't have to wonder what's going on. They know, because the communication is up-leveled so much. Because when we understand the need for belonging, having their being, look at the word belonging. People are longing to be a part of something. So when they know what's going on, they feel they belong. They feel they're wanted. They feel they're respected. So it's one of HR's biggest gifts that they can bring is sharing with the business owners. And when I say owners, I mean the business unit owners, the business leaders, the executives, the need for transparency. In the absence of information, the mind, the human brain makes things up. We go immediately to mistrust and we make up worst case scenarios. So the outcome of having a really high powered, high contributor in HR is they get that. They understand the psyche of the human being and that human beings go to threat and fear. And so they raise that level of communication. Next is raising team engagement. When each and every person in that pyramid knows their role, they know what their role is required to do to move the business forward. And Tiffany will talk about her journey in that work specifically. When they know what their role, what purpose of their role is, and how they work among the team to move the business forward, and they're inspired by it, and they're aligned with where they're going, they're naturally more engaged. It is so simple to create employee engagement. We, as the business community, have overcomplicated it with these rewards and recognition and trips and perks and parties. We are missing the basics. People want to have purpose and meaning in their role. Reducing drama and conflict. When HR is operating in partnership with the business leader and you're in front of the issues and you've planned ahead and you are identifying performance issues long before they become performance issues, you reduce drama and conflict. Most managers say that they spend 80% of their time fighting fires and fixing problems. And when we dig deeper, we find that most of the problems they're dealing with today, they knew about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago, and they just didn't want to deal with it. So a really strong partnership with HR, especially a person that says, hey, Jim, I know your number one goal is to increase revenue by $10 million. What's in your way? What keeps you up at night? And how can I serve to remove those obstacles? A person who does that will greatly reduce downtime and drama and conflict on the job. Because when people are unhappy, when people are on performance improvement programs, when a manager has employees that are not performing, all the drama starts. People don't get along, they fight and argue. And again, some basic people principles can greatly reduce that. Notice I didn't say eliminate it because we're not working in, la la land here, but we can greatly reduce it when we get ahead of the drama curve. Also, elevating the managerial satisfaction. 70% of the people in management roles today are not engaged in their roles. The Gallup survey came out at the beginning of the year, and most of the people that are disengaged are the people leading the people. And then to make matters worse, McKinsey just released a report that only 18% of the people in leadership roles believe they have the skill to lead. So no wonder they're disengaged. They don't know how to do it. They don't have the tools to do it. And they're muddling around and they don't like confrontation. So they ignore all those people problems until they blow up. So of course they're not happy. And when the HR leader is focusing on, my job is to make our managers more effective. My job is to make sure they're trained and equipped and they have the tools and they have a coach, or I become their coach. I go off and go to coaching school and I become their coach and I become the person, not me, Margaret, but the person in the HR department running people ops. My job is to make everybody better. When that happens, people do get better. And of course, all of this leads to improved employee productivity. Now, when we looked at the survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a lack of engagement, lack of employee performance is costing companies costing the United States of America, companies that reside within the USA, $430 billion a year. So if you just look at that, that's 4% of the GDP. So if you look at your own organization, whatever your annual revenues are, If you take 4% as a conservative number, that's what poor management, drama, silos, conflict, lack of engagement, lack of transparency is costing your organization. We're currently, Keen Alignment is working with a company out of Tennessee, and they make water filtration systems. So they're in the manufacturing industry, but they also serve pharma, military, and government. And they deal with clean water, pretty big problem right now. The company has had 3 CEOs in the last 10 years. 50% of their employees have been around 10 years. When we got asked to come on board and do our first program with them, it's called a level set. What we heard from the employees is they have no trust. That when they have brought in new leaders and removed old leaders, the organization owned by private equity wasn't understanding the need to get people okay with all these changes. People hate change. They freak about change. They with no transparency, they go to worst case scenarios. So everyone at this organization has been operating in fear and frustration. When they got really comfortable and they felt really safe in front of the CEO, they said that they believe collectively as a group of 40 people, these are all the executives, the top line managers, and the high potentials. 40 people said that they believe 40% of their work week is wasted in contention with different departments, in being unclear of what they're doing, of not being trained, so making mistakes. These are big numbers. Now, if you can figure out what 40%, whatever your number is, maybe your people only say they waste 10% of their time or 20%, but Christine went back and looked, she's the HR director at this company, she went back and looked at what is 40% of our labor spend, and the numbers were astronomical. And even the employees started to get the impact of wasting all that money on just poor people relations. So they're about a quarter through their cultural transformation. We go back out there next week where we have both groups of people, all the executives and the managers with all the other group working together so that they can start to work through some of these trust issues, some of this drama and conflict, some of this lack of engagement, and of course, low employee productivity. So I'm going to have Tiffany introduce herself to you and talk a little bit about where she was at the day she contacted Keen Alignment. Her and her boss contacted Keen Alignment.
So again, good morning, Tiffany. Like Magi says, we were facing much of what she talked about in the beginning of the presentation in regards to the old school HR. There was really no partnership between human resources, what we were doing, and the business. And in fact, the business and HR overall, encompassing the whole organization, really had no plan for the future. We were operating in a day-to-day type scenario instead of really looking at the organization from a systems perspective and understanding how HR could partner with the business and drive that forward. We had poor engagement throughout our facilities, throughout the organization at a variety of levels. Very poor communication between our hourly workers, our supervisory level, and management staff. We are a manufacturing organization. We have been around since 1887. So if you think about that in terms of the number of years in the archaic type industry that we were in, there had been very little change over those years in terms of how we dealt with our people and how we really partnered our people with the impact that we wanted them to make for the business. So it was a period of understanding and transitioning from understanding that employees and team members wanted to be engaged with what they do. They wanted to have a purpose, and we lacked that. It was a very fear-based culture, command and control type environment. Supervisors enforced and held people accountable, but by saying, do so or you'll go without. So it was a very, fear-based reinforcement of goals and expectations, which, as we know, does not drive engagement in any manner. We had, and we're facing, as many organizations are, an overwhelming amount of people, our baby boomers, that were getting ready to retire. A lot of our baby boomers had promoted throughout the organization and were in highly skilled positions and carried, a great amount of experience. So we really had to understand how we were going to transition from that day-to-day operation. We'll just replace them. You can't just replace 40 years of experience the day that they walk out the door. We were very reactive at that point. There was no proactive succession planning, and really that was something that I sat down with the GM, who was also new at the time, and it scared us. There were a variety of things that scared us, but that was, very much one of them. What's going to happen is this wave of people, this wave of highly skilled, knowledgeable resources decides to walk out the door, and we have nothing to replace them with. That feeds into really the next one, a lack of on-the-job training. If you're not proactive in terms of succession planning, and then you have no on-the-job training to go with that, that's a very bad combination for failure. Not only are you not getting people in there ahead of time and able to absorb and transfer all that knowledge of those 40-year veterans, you're not even able to connect the dots in terms of the tasks that they're doing on the job. So there was, a big gap there that we needed to fill. We had high turnover. We are in heavy manufacturing, and that was looked at as okay. That was the status quo. Turnover, we could replace people. We have a variety of, positions that, weren't as highly skilled. So it was expected that the turnover was going to happen. And not only was it expected, but we had very little plan to do anything about it. We had created a variety of new plant roles because of the movement that was going to be created through turnover and through the retirement. And we really had, nobody in place to move into those positions. We also had a union that we were constantly at odds with, in terms of feeling that we were moving in the right direction and feeling that they had a say in what we were doing from a business perspective. We were not partners with our union at that point, and we needed to understand how to start fresh with them. And in terms of, the HR department, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about myself, but we were looked at as the regulatory compliance drivers, the police of the organization, where we walked around, pointing our fingers and laying down the law with the employees. By no means were we looked at strategically in terms of as a partner to the business. We hired, fired, replaced people, and we're really a silo of a resource that was looked at as kind of a niche department that really wasn't involved in any communications with the rest of the business until they needed, to hire or fire or some type of compliance needs. And myself, I had fallen prey to that and had moved into a very regulatory-based style. And I was constantly looking for and became the police. So I was enabling that type of behavior. And the day that we called Magi, myself and my GM, both of us were relatively new to our roles. I had been with the organization for 7 years and had moved into what we called the industrial relations manager job. So if that doesn't tell you how archaic we were, I don't know what does. But that was my title at the time. Myself and my GM, who had been in his role for about a year, we knew that it didn't feel right. We knew that if we continued on, not only was it going to kill the passion that we had for what we did, but it was going to kill the passion of the organization and obviously not improve the organization overall in terms of how we did business, in terms of employee engagement, in terms of leadership. At that point, leadership and development was looked at as a bad thing.
Tiffany,
just to give,
I want to transition because I'm going to get an opportunity to talk about that. So the first thing that we did with Tiffany and her boss, Mark, is we said, listen, we can go in and help you with your culture, but it begins with you. No cultural alignment, no employee engagement is ever going to be effective if the two people that are most interested in seeing the change, if those two people do not start working on themselves. So they both said, yeah, we got it. And then a part of the work that we did was work with Tiffany, Mark, and the rest of the executive team to first work on the leader within. And so given Tiffany is my co-host today, I want her to talk a little bit about some of the work that she needed to do on her own leadership. Now she's leading up into that, was saying that she was very regulatory. But when we talk about honoring the leader within, first and foremost, it's being really self-aware with who am I? Who is this person in here? What do I need? What do I want? What lights my fire? And what's in the way? What's the barriers from me getting what I want and removing those barriers? Most of us think, oh, our boss is a barrier, or that one manager is a barrier, or we don't pay enough money. That's a barrier. But the truth is, it all is existent inside of our thinking and our perspectives and our values and how we behave when we're not honoring our values or when other people aren't honoring our values. So there's 5 components to the coactive leadership model. We're really only talking about the leader within. So Tiff, if you could, for about 1 minute or less, just give us some insight as to what you developed inside of your leader within.
And so as Magi was, talking about, in terms of my leadership, I understood that I needed to move out of being, compliance driven. I understood that the one variable that I could have control of in all the things that we needed to change was myself. And I understood that I had to get out of my own way to really make any changes or look at the organization in a whole new way. So I had to reach deep down inside myself to understand what it was about myself that was driving the organization to act and my department to act the way that it did. In order to make changes within that organization, I knew it was going to take me first, me elevating myself, me opening myself up to development and to understanding how I could get better, how my department could get better, how I could really become a better partner to the organization. I had to understand that what had worked for me in the past wasn't going to work for me going forward, and that in order to overcome the status quo, I had to open my mind to a new way of thinking. And so that's really, was my first step in all the changes that we made, and that was to understand who I was and who I wanted to be, so that I could work on that to move the organization forward.
So we started with an organizational assessment, and I know assessments are, I've been talking about assessments since 2000, and for many years, everybody that was in recruiting and even HR is like, oh, assessments, nobody wants to take those. Now everybody's hungry because we're suddenly data driven. But the reality is, if you have a good assessment, and I have a white paper on my website if you want to get that white paper, if the assessment passes the 4/5 rule, if it's got a validity index, the assessment we use looks at 4 parts of a human being: what they value, how they see the world, their perspective, which is how they see, and everybody sees it differently, how they operate and their operating style, and then how they actually lead in 7 key categories. And we'll give you an opportunity to take the assessment for free for being on this webinar at the end of the mini workshop. What it allows, though, is for the leader to look at these 7 categories and say, these categories are important to me, or maybe envisioning the future is important, but communicating my vision isn't important because I'm not in a role where I'm given the opportunity to do that. But it's things like envisioning the future and all that it takes to see the end game, communicating your vision, getting people to follow you, guiding and mentoring people, and then being a servant leader. And it's interesting, the number 1 trait in servant leadership is accountability for others, because when we let other people off the hook, we're not serving them. So, and then the last piece is, how much do I know thyself? And I think it was Shakespeare, to thy own self be true. We are, most of us, out of touch with what our real strengths and weaknesses are. When we did Tiffany's assessment, what the paper said she was good at showed us, gave us insight, but what we really saw is when we did the level set, when we did the leadership retreat, everything in that document that with Tiffany's strengths showed up in the room when Tiffany got tuned in and turned on to her commitment. And it was right there in front of our eyes. And then the fun was when we started showing her who she already was, that she forgot, or that she got enculturated into the cloud way of doing things. And she put aside her way of looking at the world and put aside what was really important to her, which was really serving and elevating people. So the first step in any kind of HR transformation, any kind of maximizing your effectiveness, is to first do an inventory of where you are in terms of your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities. And if you do not deal with your opportunities and weaknesses, things that may be a threat to your growth and development. The second thing that we did is we started to tie each and every role in the organization to the big purpose and to where the company was going. And I want Tiffany to talk a little bit about the role analysis process and how she took that on. Keen started it. We brought it in as the second part of the HR transformation, is teaching the organization how to create CPRs, comprehensive position requirements, for each and every role, and how to align those roles with the mission, the vision, the values, and to have a key accountability, key performance indicators. So every role was clear on how that role was moving the business results forward. So Tiffany, can you share a little bit first about your the learning that you learned from the CPR/role analysis process, and then to end the 1 minute, how you then turn that into platform for succession planning?
Right. So in terms of our old-fashioned job descriptions that we were utilizing, they were not attached to the mission, vision, and values of our organization, and really created zero alignment or purpose for people on how they delivered results and how they provided for the organization. And so we wanted to create a more fulfilling experience and looked at CPRs to understand how we could drive that purpose, how we could drive an understanding and clarify those expectations. People want to make sense of what they do on a daily basis and what they do for their work so that they know that they're delivering results. It was easy for us to say people aren't delivering the right results, but why was that? It wasn't because people came to work and said, I don't want to show up. It was because we hadn't created a space or a tool or mechanism that really helped us drive that. The CPRs helped us align everything that we needed in a role in terms of our role expectations, in terms of the values and behaviors, in terms of the competencies, and hire in a whole new way so that we knew that we weren't just taking a wild stab because it was the person that we really liked. We strategically aligned each of those roles with the business needs. And then to help drive some of the initiatives that we were working on, as Magi stated, I took those and used that as a basis for our succession planning, looking at people within the organization that naturally had those behaviors, those competencies, and that was their natural way of being. So they would, be a very close fit, and it would serve them well as a person and really help drive their engagement and help from an organizational perspective, because there was less, development and things that needed to be done, that person was already a natural fit. So looking at that and understanding where we had gaps in our succession planning in terms of understanding who was going to be a great fit for a role, who maybe had a little bit of development to do, who was in a path that may not have been the right path for them. That's something we continue to work on, but is really helping us be a more proactive organization.
Okay, good. So the Talent Capacity Index, basically what this is, once you do your CPRs and you understand the purpose for each role and why it exists, then you do an inventory of each of those people in those roles. And if they have a high knowledge level in the organization, a high skill set in the organization, and they understand what they're doing, and they understand, let's say they're in a manager or leadership role, how to do that, their scores would be high here. If their actual on-the-job performance is strong, their scores would be high here. So ideally, an organization would have the majority of their people in this quadrant. What we find much more often than not is the majority of the people are in this quadrant. They're not yet producing to the level, or they don't yet have the competencies. So the power of an HR person understanding this information, as Tiffany has been speaking to, not only allows you to do succession planning, but it allows you to make sure you have the right fit in the right job. And if the will is there, but the skill is not there, then you can customize training for what that specific person or that department needs. So the understanding the talent that your organization has available to themselves and making that information palatable for the manager is like giving them $1 million. The data at their fingertips that you can provide is super powerful. And you might say, well, it's in our ATS and it's in our employee management system, but as Tiffany and many of you on the call would attest to, your managers don't go to those systems. They want to sit down and talk to a human and say, hey, Mike, Barry can do this. Cindy can do this. Jocelyn can do this. Javier can do that. Have you considered other opportunities or cross-training? So Talent Capacity Index is a big piece of elevating your strategy and your HR department. So now, Tiffany, I want you to think about, and we're about 40, we got about 20 minutes left, so we have a lot of slides to get through. But your breakthrough moment when you realized, hey man, I'm a chief talent strategist, and this is where I need to play. Was there a moment in time you had that insight and you made that choice to then enroll the rest of the executive team in who you really were, not who they were viewing you as, and what you could really do for the organization? Are you there? Hello?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
I'm here.
Sorry.
There had been a few moments where I had touched base with the old me. I knew where my passion was in helping develop and drive people and, you know, optimize them and help them find their purpose and grow. But I had lost all of that. The culture and me allowing that status quo to continue had really absorbed all that. And we teamed up with Keen, and there had been a couple of moments where I had tapped in to, hey, this is really where I want to go and who I want to be. But as Magi recalls it, and she tells the story, because she was an outside, you know, visual of this, but there was a moment where we were at our retreat, and you know, our leadership team was in strife about trying to solve this puzzle that Magi had given us. And I had spoke up a couple of times and said, hey, I've got the answer to this. And male-dominated management team, I wasn't, you know, being heard. And that used to be my excuse for why I couldn't make changes, was because I wasn't being listened to. And Magi looked at me, and I stood up on the chair and proclaimed, hey, I've got the answer, listen to me. And indeed I did. And that was really the defining moment where I knew, hey, this is about me owning my voice, owning my power, and being able to not put it on somebody else that I wasn't being listened to, but really take that ownership and understand that if it is to be, it is up to me, and I have to look at myself first.
Good. Thank you. So that is a perfect segue to what it really means to take on leadership development for yourself. It begins with who you are being. And Tiffany really explained it well. She had to turn the finger from pointing, they're not listening to me, to how am I communicating that people aren't listening, or where do I shut down? So all leadership development begins with self-awareness. Actually, all emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness. I would never pay for a leadership training that didn't begin with a strong dose of self-awareness, because you can learn all the skills in the world, but all that pretty skills on top of a fundamental disbelief in yourself is like putting whipped cream on a pile of doo-doo, because many of us have limiting beliefs that we don't even know they had. And in Tiffany's limiting beliefs, it's, who am I? Who am I to tell all these people who understand manufacturing to do something different? So it begins with self-awareness, and then it begins in really understanding the neuroscience of how our brains work. We have a right and a left hemisphere. Everybody kind of knows that. She's right-brained, he's left-brained kind of thing. But the truth is we all have both sides of our brain, unless we have brain damage. And we need to learn how to leverage and integrate. I use the eagle from yoga because it's an integration pose. And the more I learn about yoga, the more yoga is, the philosophy of yoga is neuroscience. Just was thousands and thousands of years ago before the word neuroscience became coined. So it's really understanding the power of your fully integrated prefrontal cortex, or your executive brain. And then understanding what is your response when the world is coming at you. What's the impulse that is triggered within you, and how do you respond to those impulses? And then when you understand the feeling state that the impulse comes from, and then the words you use with that impulse, you can tailor that back to say, wait a second, how do I want to respond to this situation? And how do I calm down and remove my emotions from it so I can respond like the person I choose to be, the leader I choose to be? And then another big piece of this is the whole systems thinking, seeing the whole span, the people. Without people, business doesn't work. We get it because we're in HR, but by the way, most of those managers, they might say that, but they don't really get at the depth of what I'm saying. Whole systems thinking is looking at the big picture and saying, this is the system, this is the business, this is what the business needs, this is our market sector, this is our customer base, this is our income, this is our profit, really getting all of it. Then understanding how people fulfill the business and how the work people do, how these together, the people and the work that needs to be done, the role requirements, lead to the big picture. So Tiffany and every leader we've ever worked with really needed to learn and needs to learn how to connect those dots. It's not as obvious as one would think, especially in tech companies where the left hemisphere rules, and in manufacturing companies and in healthcare companies where the left hemisphere rules. In hospitality companies, it's easier for the leaders of hospitality companies to understand, if you don't take care of your people won't take care of your customers. They actually get it, and they spend big money on training and engagement and communications and leadership, because they know if people don't feel good about themselves, they're not going to deliver. But it's this left hemisphere company in the tech space, in the manufacturing space, in the healthcare space that needs to do the learning of the whole system. And then it's understanding that without integrity, without clear agreements, nothing works. Things fall apart. And what's interesting on the leadership assessment that you'll have the opportunity to take, that Tiffany has taken and every company that we've worked with takes, is the lowest score globally. 2 lowest scores: accountability for others and self-management. Recovering from upsets. So I think it's called self-control. It doesn't mean people haul off and scream at people, but it means they take rejection, criticism, change personally. 2 lowest scores. So one of the elements we really work on teaching people is how to create ground rules and agreements around the work and the changes that need to happen so that things can move forward with integrity. Next is specifically foundations, and this is really looking at strategizing the HR department. And I'll have Tiffany talk a little bit about her HR strategy session that she led. We helped her, but we didn't lead it. She led it, and because that's a big growth sharing too. So this is really about who is the HR department, creating a vision, having the HR department be aligned with the corporation, understanding that everything that HR does, it focuses on the human system. Whenever you have more than 2 people in an organization or a family or a community, it becomes a human system. Well, everything that HR does, hiring, onboarding, job descriptions, people management, people development, performance management, it's all the human system. And so how do we go after each element in that human life cycle, that human system, that employee life cycle, and optimize people so that it becomes an interaction with people rather than a transaction, and that anytime we touch these people, they have an opportunity to grow. Every time they participate in a hiring process or an onboarding process or training, that they're literally getting something out of it. And how to create role value for each and every role in the organization, and the clear outcomes, and how that leads to people being empowered and enabled to do the work. So Tiffany, in about a minute or less, please share a few components of your HR strategy, and I'll advance the slide because we need to move on, but I want you to share that.
So our HR strategy was really the foundation of changing how our department was viewed and how we operated in terms of the overall organization. I would say the number one thing that affected our HR strategy and our ability to change our department was the foundational pieces that were done prior to the strategy itself, and that was really understanding and working with the other managers to understand what they went through on a daily basis and what their needs were. Spending a day, a week, a month in their shoes, understanding who our customers were, who drove the business, who our vendors were, how our business worked, so that we could come together and really understand what we were talking about. And then when we came into our strategy meeting, we had all of those players there so that they could contribute and really answer that question that Magi mentioned earlier. How can we service your piece of the business, and how can we deliver on business strategy better than we ever have been able to before? And that opened their eyes. We had done that foundational piece that really allowed them to say, hey, HR wants to be a part of this business and they want to change the game, and they are a partner with us in moving and accomplishing our goals. And that was the number one thing that I think we could have done to really excel that HR strategy and put us on track to what we've become in terms of no longer being reactive, but being proactive, and me being able to bring solutions to our managers to say, hey, you had this issue, this is what we're doing to partner with you to fix that, and to make sure that this is out of your way and no longer an issue. And that really has created trust and really built a foundation for a great, people business linkage.
Good, good. So new age HR, systems thinking, she just spoke all to that, understanding the business strategy, creating a people strategy that is meant to elevate how people contribute to the business, people, the work they do, and the overall business objectives. Leadership readiness. Even in the interviews that she did with those leaders, she was bringing them to new kind of thinking about how even they could contribute. And then one of the other big issues that you're going to have to look at if you want to maximize your contribution is, are you teaching people readiness skills? Are you teaching communication skills? Are you teaching response agility skills? Are you teaching people how to be the best people they can be at work? Because this is what's needed right now. Our country, I don't know where people are listening from, but if you're in the US is the country that is going to turn into not the technology gurus, it's going to be the architects of the technology, the architects of change, the innovators, and the people. Country, To Sell is Human is a Daniel Pink book, and The World is Flat is a Thomas Friedman book. Both of those books talk greatly about what's going to change because of AI and because of other technology. Our folks need to become, our employees, agile, able, resourceful, resilient, and very strong communicators. And so inspiring alignment, Tiffany also spoke about this. What's the mission, vision, and values, and how do we link people to it so that people can operate in synchronicity with where the business is going? So Tiff, we're kind of running out of time. Do you have anything you want to say about what you did with your managers to link action plans with milestone or performance management or celebration, specifically with regards to getting the business to the next level?
So I would just say, in terms of inspiring alignment, the number one thing that we did was the creation of our mission, vision, values, and those CPRs to really drive that alignment and create that expectation and link those people all the way through. That is the number one step that drove our organization forward in that area.
And how many hours did you put towards that, you and your team?
Oh, wow. I would, thousands of hours, 6 people on the team. We did, at one point we were at 74 roles, do the math, and each one of those are, I would say 3 hours if you count prep time and then time in the in the chair. So a lot of hours.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring that
well
up.
Worth it.
I wanted to bring it up because it is one of the friction points. People call me and I want to elevate HR. And then I say, okay, are you willing to dedicate 1,000 hours in the next year to your own training and development and to moving your human system? So we are there to support, but we can't do all the work, or it will cost your organization way too much money. So I want to give you a sense of what cultural transformation is and our process at Keen. So it begins with knowing you want to fix your culture, want to elevate your culture, want to shape your culture. And then the first step is bringing the leadership team together to create what's working, what's not working, and start to tell the truth about that. Then the second step is strategic advance, which is where the mission, vision, and values are created. Third step is what Tiffany talked about, aligning each and every role in the organization with those business objectives and with the mission and vision. And then management training, teaching the managers about self-awareness, about response agility, about how their brain works, about how to tap in and turn on to who they really are, so that when they learn the basics of management, that they can move forward with it. So we grease the wheels and give people the personal amp and energy so that whatever they're learning, they can own it. And then HR coaching, HR development, and then implementing conscious hiring. If you want to have a culture that works, you need to bring people in that fit to that culture. So Tiffany, I want you to speak a little bit. We've got about 5 minutes left, but less than a minute on the practical results that your team and that the Cultural Alignment Initiative produced a year and 3 months into your journey.
Right. Obviously, all the work that we did, we wanted to measure that and make sure that there were, true results coming out of that. Sometimes results dealing with people can be a little bit hard to measure, but it was as simple as understanding what our business objectives were and then looking at what direction they were going. So aligning our team, driving engagement, the results spoke to that. We had turnover. It was down from 9% on the salaried side to 6.9. We had a 6.6% raise in revenue. We had a 2.6% rise in gross profit, 1.5% increase in net profit reserves, and then 1.4% increase in net profit. So, those were some pretty tangible results that we could see. And, a real big theme was that all of our business objectives were moving in the right direction.
And then the intangible things that I saw is the leadership team became a team. It wasn't production or casting versus or the foundry versus the assembly. It was or accounting versus safety. It was one team. They were collaborating. They were working together to solve problems. And almost every person on that team became vigilant about how they treated people. And they became aware of the people impact. Some people were easier to train than others. Some of those managers resisted, but they became a team and they worked collaboratively together. So some of the work that we do is we do a lot of classroom. We also take people out to the ropes courses so they can stretch beyond what they think they can do, because all this stuff exists in our head. But when you move the body, when you stretch yourself beyond your physical constraints, you create new neural pathways and you gain more self-confidence. So this picture is Tiffany and her boss, so the head of the company and the head of HR working together to move through this obstacle course. And it's simply a metaphor for all the obstacles they moved through. So what it took from Tiffany and what it took from her boss is to put a line in the sand. This is the commitment that we're moving towards. And sometimes Tiffany's commitment was way bigger in HR than Mark's commitment was as the general manager. She would push him, he would push her, she would pull him, he would pull her. but it really took from her, Tiffany Tremel's standpoint, if it's to be, it's up to me. And so for you, we're going to give you an opportunity, as I promised earlier, to opt in and take this free assessment. If you type the number 44222 or put your finger in your phone, and then the body of the text will be maximize 123, you'll get an opportunity to take this assessment and do your own self-awareness. Who am I? What are my values? How do I rank as a leader? And then Keen Alignment does have an online university that you can take some courses with if you want. So the fact of the matter is employee engagement is at an all-time low. More than 70% of the people say they are disengaged in their job. Almost a third of the people say they feel they took the wrong job. Most companies do not have a progressive succession plan. And the competency gap of people leaving and people coming is huge. And CEOs are clamoring and requiring an ROI on any people investment. So people in HR need to understand what that means and how they measure it. Future trends are 1/3 of our workforce in the United States will change. We need to teach people resiliency. We need to teach people a new way of thinking so they can change as the organization changes, and people resist change. So that's why most management and change initiatives fail, because we're not addressing the humanity piece of it. Really, it's about you looking at your role, you looking at who you are as a leader and what you need to do to raise workforce engagement, and then looking at how can you touch every element of the employee engagement, what matters to people, the drivers of engagement, so that whatever you're doing has lots of impacts, not just one impact, but systemic impacts in the organization. Understanding your role and what you do for the organization, and making sure every other role in that organization has a purpose. People know the value of that purpose, and people know the outcomes. Really learning to lead to fulfill your objectives, facilitation, learning how to evoke transformation in others, learn how to mediate conflict, because there's a ton of it in every organization, and really learning to own the HR role. All of this we've talked about: strategic alignments, understanding the business model, understanding how your company makes money, understanding the contribution margin of the different people that work there. If you look at all your employees, what's the contribution margin? And knowing what's the constraints that are keeping your company from where you want to be and where you are to get there. Like, what's in the way? What's in the way of getting us from where we are to where we want to be? And then understanding what you need to fix in the human system. Tiffany's been on this journey for about 4 years. She will be on the journey for the rest of her career, because every time changes happen, she'll need to change. So I'm going to move towards the last piece, is how you can learn more, how you can work with Keen Alignment. We provide private one-on-one coaching. We have over 25 different coaches. You can attend one of our retreats, or you can join our institute, our Keen Institute community. Everything we do, including this webinar, is HRCI and SHRM credit certified. All of our online classes, all of our automated. And then we have an upcoming retreat in October in California. It's a cultural alignment workshop, 2.5 days, deep diving on how to create a new culture and a talent strategy that works for the 21st century. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your trust. And thank you, Tiffany, for all of your sharing. Is there anything you'd like to say to complete?
Thanks, Magi, for having me, and I hope everybody, got something out of this. I would like to leave with just one thing. As the PowerPoint said, be the change. Look within and really open yourself up to that change and the possibility to be more. So I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day, and this is just the first step to realizing that possibility.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.